Hi, Jason, can you hear us?
I can hear you just fine. I'm having I'm on my phone. I have to restart my laptop here. So we can just get going.
Jason, you're going to chair as vice chair in Rich's absence.
Yeah.
Comfortable doing that?
Yeah.
Okay. I have the legal notice once you're ready.
Okay. I would like to call tonight's Zoning Board of Appeals meeting to order. So that's what, 7:01. The August 12th meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I don't have the paper in front of me. Is it important that I say the exact words, Aaron, or can I just surmise?
Oh, an introduction? No, you can go ahead and give an introduction.
Okay. My name.
General procedure for the hearing, and I can fill in as needed.
Yeah. So my name is Jason Brown. I am the vice chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. We have several members. Some are regular members and some are alternate members for the meeting. We will have 5 regular members seated for the meeting, and I believe that we have all 5 here today. Are we missing? I see.
No. So Jason, that should be our first
Right.
order of business.
So we need to see
4 members this evening.
Yeah, we need to see. We only have 4 members this evening.
We only have 4 members this evening,
Okay.
and that includes John as an alternate.
Okay.
So you would need to seat John.
Yeah, so I would like to seat John as a regular member. John is normally an alternate. And then after we see John, we can go down and everybody can introduce themselves. So I said I'm Jason Brown, and then we'll just start with Bill and work our way down. So we have Bill Piggott, who's sitting there in the blue, and the camera's not pointing to who else is on the board. It's just pointing at you, Aaron.
Okay, Dennis Crowe.
Yeah.
It follows the voice.
Yeah.
John Zier.
And John Zier.
You got Dennis, right?
Yeah, Dennis Crowe and John Zier. So usually we have 5 members on the board. Today we only have 4 members hearing appeals. So all of our votes today to receive an adjudication of your application are going to require all 4 of us to vote unanimously. Usually it's 4 out of 5, but because we only have 4, we need a unanimous decision here to move on. If you have submitted an application at any time before your hearing starts, if you would like to withdraw your application, please state your desire to do so. Additionally, the way that the meeting is broken up is that for each of the applications in front of us, we will see a public portion where the applicant will present their application, and then there will be discussion and questions from the board. We will then open it up to public comment. When you're stating your public comment, please state your name and residence prior to your comment. Following the public comment session, we will move into an executive session where the 4 board members will discuss the merits of your application. And then we will come back to our public portion of the meeting in order for the vote to be taken. Did I hit everything?
Yes. So just to clarify, because there are 4 affirmative votes needed, unanimous vote here this evening for your variance to move forward and pass. It is at the applicant's choice if you prefer to proceed this evening, or if you would prefer to open and continue. to the following month where you may have additional members present. So if anybody is interested in doing that, just so that you don't have to sit through everyone else's application, just let us know and we can open the agenda, reshuffle, open and continue for the next month.
So,
Or,
so may I ask a point of order on one of those?
yes, I just wanted to remind everybody, because it is challenging at times for folks attending remotely to hear in this room. It does work well. But there are times that it won't pick up. So we do have a microphone for the public, and our speaker is here in the center on this little doodad on the table. If we see that it's not coming up or anybody attending remotely cannot hear, we can pass the microphone around also.
So question on the unanimous vote, you need 4 votes.
Yes,
We have one item tonight that is a continuation.
yes.
We need 4 members who were part of the first hearing. And John, were you part of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody
Were you
was
seated?
here,
Was he-
actually.
Okay, you were here for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe everybody was here last month. Are there any applicants that wish to continue to October instead of moving forward? Okay, easy enough. So Mr. Vice Chair, would you like me to read the legal notice?
Yes, Ms. Mannix, can you please read the legal notice?
Sure. Notice is hereby given that the board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 at 7 p.m. The meeting will be conducted as a hybrid meeting in Meeting Room A, Town Campus, 8 Campus Drive, and remotely via Zoom online webinar. Further details, including application materials, are posted on the Town of Madison website, www.madisonct.org, under the calendar link on the meeting. Questions and or comments can be emailed to the Land Use Office at landuse@madisonct.org up to 24 hours in advance of the meeting. Applications heard this evening: 23-12, 31 Parker Avenue, map 15, lot 51, residential R5 zone. Owner Ilona B. Marsh, applicant Greg Fettis, Fettis Engineering LLC. It's a variance request to construct new single-family dwelling per section 3.6D to allow 11.74 feet west and 9.6 feet east setback for the house where 12 feet is required, and 3.49 feet to the west setback where 12 feet is allowed for the garage, and section 2.17 to allow 28.96 feet to a critical coastal resource where 50 feet is required. This application includes a coastal site plan review. Application 23-14, 27 Pent Road, map 18, lot 8, residential R5 zone. Owner applicant is Heather Collette. Variance request per section 12.6 to enlarge existing non-conforming building, section 3.6A to allow 19.1 foot front yard setback where 25 feet is required, and section 3.6D to allow 7.8 foot side yard setback where 12 feet is required to construct a second floor addition to a single family dwelling. This application includes a coastal site plan review. Application 23-15, 181 Mungertown Road, map 55, lot 17, zone RU2. Owner Sarah Linos and Alex Linos. Applicant is Duo Dickinson Architect. Variance request per section 5.6F to allow 34 feet 5 inches front yard setback where 40 feet is required to construct an entry rooflet over a front door. Application 23-16, 48A and 48B Wall Street, map 38, lots 36 and 37, zone D. Owner applicant Saltwater Property Group LLC and Saltwater Property Group 2 LLC. Variance request per section 6.2.3H to allow average building height of 35 feet where a maximum building height of 30 feet is allowed to construct new 3-story commercial office building. Dated this 21st day of August, 2023, Richard Gilbert, Chair. This was published twice in the source, once on August 31st and once on September 7th. Okay. First on the agenda, Mr. Chair, is 23-12, 31 Parker Avenue.
Recording in progress.
And our applicant, all of your team is present in person.
We are indeed.
Okay. So I'm happy to screen share whatever plans you're presenting before everybody so the folks remote can see.
Thank you very much. I'm Michael Sulzbach. I was here last time. Do I need that?
Yes, please.
For recording.
And you're welcome to step up to it.
Well, I was about to say, if.
Would you like the podium?
I would just as soon stay right where I am because we're at eye level. And I won't be looking down at others and I have my desk handy here, if that is okay. Otherwise, I'll go wherever you tell me.
I think that's fine.
So let me start that way. We were here, all of us, last month. And again, for the purpose of constructing a new dwelling in the site of a more non-conforming former dwelling. And we went through it in pretty great detail with renderings, drawings, plans, and everything that one might want. One thing that did develop during the course of that hearing was a question of what was the setback being requested from the critical coastal resource. And it had to do with how that was defined. And so we conferred with staff, reached a conclusion that we should target a different critical coastal resource. Our surveyor, Greg Fettis, is here. Made the corrections to his map. We've submitted that. And we made the correction to our application, the variance request, calling now for a 28.96 setback where 50 is required. So that's sort of our situation. Again, I won't rehash all the issues relating to hardship, the fact that we're improving virtually every non-conformity that was present in the prior dwelling, as a matter of fact, whether it's the bulk of the building, square feet, setbacks, virtually everything you can imagine, plus it's just a smaller building, as a matter of fact, and it is FEMA compliant, which is really what brings us here. I can turn this over for the moment to Greg Fettis to at least point out the change that was made to the map that you had before.
Good evening. My name is Greg Fettis with Fettis Engineering, an office at 70 Essex Street, Mystic. Is this location okay for the plan? It's
Yeah.
going to be up there also, or do you want me to point to this?
Either way.
Sure,
Okay.
whatever's easier.
So, yeah, previously we had this dimension, the house dimensioned to the CJL, which is the coastal jurisdiction line. So the only change is we changed that and we dimensioned it from the corner to the closest point of the face of the seawall, which changed it from
No,
I think
my
it's
apologies.
close, but it's not the latest and greatest.
Sorry about that. To a rough start. What's the date on your plan?
8:15.
Yeah, that's it.
I think we revised it twice in one day. Oh, yeah, you're right. You had the right one. My
Yeah,
bad.
Okay.
Sorry. Rough start all the way around. So again, that was really the only change. It went from the existing to the face of the seawall was 20.7. And now we're 2104. So we're a touch further away from the seawall. As Attorney Salzbeck stated, we're bettering the nonconformities kind of all the way around and produced a smaller house. that's FEMA compliant, that deals with roof runoff, a compliant septic system that meets most of the requirements of a code compliance system. It's got the size and so forth. As everyone's aware, and I stated last time, there is some fill on the site, so that prohibits it from being fully compliant. But we're actually reducing the number of bedrooms from 5 to 4.
Great.
5 to 3, excuse me. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I think we went over pretty much everything last time. This was
Right, this is a continuation of the public hearing. It was renoticed for the correction in the distance, but you did, and Michael, if you're comfortable with your presentation for the coastal site plan from the last
That.
evening
as
of the
it was-
hearing.
As it was augmented, in fact, by the deep review, which had no criticism of our plan.
Yes.
Should we see Dylan?
Where's Dylan? Hey, hold on, Dylan, you snuck
We
in.
got 5.
You got-
Okay. Okay, Mr. Chair's here. Okay, Jason, can you hear us now?
Yes, everything's all good now.
Okay, Jason, just so you're aware, Dylan joined us and for the record, Dylan Stella is here, another alternate board member who
I don't think
he can be seated at the next
Yeah.
Yeah, he can be seated, he can be seated for the next, but not now.
and can be seated at the next hearing. Okay, any questions from the board for Mr. Fettis or Mr. Attorney Sisco?
Not on this part. I understand. I understand the change in measure.
The revision?
So instead of on the original application, you were 46 away, where 50 feet is required, right? Now you're closer to the water at 28 feet.
well, I wouldn't say the house hasn't moved, so it's just where we're measuring to. There was a interpretation difference. So to be on the safe side, we went with staff's interpretation.
The measurement from the critical coastal resource, that setback was taken off of CJL,
Coastal jurisdiction line.
right, which is an elevation depicting, delineating local versus state jurisdiction.
Right.
However, at the other side of the seawall is a beach, which is considered a coastal resource. And so that was the discrepancy at our last meeting of the accurate distance.
Right.
So the structure has not moved since our last meeting. It's
Right.
the measurement of where it's been taken from the
And I
coastal.
think
So the variance-
the issue
So the
is-
variance is modified too. So the variance on the application says 50-foot required, 46.11 feet requested. So,
Correct. And the revision is 28.96 feet requested.
But I think it's important to note that the original house measurement was taken from CGL originally too. And so that, in other words, it's not like the house moved, it's just which reference point. And do I recall that it was moved back a
It's
very small distance?
because we had to, because it wasn't square to,
Okay.
and it wasn't square to anything. So we kind of just rotated it square to the property lines. And by doing that, it moved the front of the house back slightly.
Slightly further away. So in either case, whichever reference line you're using, you've actually moved a little farther away from.
Correct.
This is the existing home to be demolished. You do have that dimension. I can't read it.
Yeah, so it's
20.7.
20.7.
20.7 existing for the back wall of the house, and the request before you is 28.96.
Okay, so it's almost 2 feet.
So they moved it back a little bit, right?
From the existing home,
Yeah,
yes, the new proposed, but not since our last meeting.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that I understand.
Yeah.
So, okay. Do we have other exhibits?
Do we have any further questions or anything else to see?
Right, were there any other exhibits added or modified for this?
Did you want to walk through the architecturals again, Ed, or are you comfortable?
If they're the same, I don't, that's not,
Precisely the same. No
okay,
change
I don't feel a need to go over that. Was there anything additional? Was any additional submissions, letters or anything else, or was there anything modified?
Your plan, you do have a revision on your plan. There is a plan date, correct?
I think we showed a dimension to the,
Because the plan says 850, the new plan says 815.
Yes, for the site plan. The architectural was clarified to show the overhang, the rear pergola, the limits over the deck.
Probably ought to just pop those up just for the record to show that they were modified. Have them in the record.
And those are in the application documents and online as well. Page 1. With the architecturals. So that's the first floor. This is the second floor here below. And the first floor is on top.
Okay, and there are modifications on there, that are just reflecting that,
It shows the outline of this
okay,
pergola.
just that,
That's the only modification,
okay.
just to match the elevation.
That was the only other thing that was changed.
The map and back.
And the legal notice, that was most important.
Yes.
So, Mr. Vice Chair, would you like to open it up for public comment?
Yes, if we're all set with the board members, I would like to open up this portion to public comment.
Sure,
We can
we
get
could
off
either
monitor
start
the
in
audience.
person or via Zoom. We have some individuals in attendance in our room, and we can just ask that you identify yourself for the record before speaking. I don't know where our microphone ended up. If you just want to pass it down, Greg, and then we'll come. I see Attorney Ainsworth is on as an attendee remotely as well. So we can go through the room and then we'll connect with Attorney
Hi, my
Ainsworth.
name is John Babiards. I live at 33 Parker Avenue, which is directly adjacent to the west. I think I got that right, with the little dotted lines on the top of the drawing. We've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. We had a house on Flower Avenue, 2 on Parker Avenue. And as you can imagine, in 30 years, we've seen a ton of changes in terms of how, things are built, especially things are built on the shoreline. And one of the things that I'd really like to compliment Mark and Lona on is designing a house that is not overbuilt. We're starting to see a lot of houses that are built, to the nth degree of what the lot allows and also what the skyline looks like. So the topography of the front, as you look at the house and everything fits in as it did before. And I think that's really a compliment to and necessary to in opposed to some of the things that we're seeing happen around town, especially in the shoreline. So I'm in support of this. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.
Anybody else in the room?
Anybody else? Okay. We can move over to online. Keith Ainsworth has his hand up.
Attorney Ainsworth is coming over so that at least you can see him. Attorney Ainsworth, you can unmute and identify yourself for the record, please.
Yes, thank you. Took me a moment to log in there. So good evening. My name is Keith Ainsworth. I'm an environmental attorney of the New Haven Bar. I have an office at 51 Elm Street. And I'm also a resident of Madison, obviously not present, but at 31 Green Springs Drive in Madison. Tonight, I have the privilege of representing Leslie Cecil and Creighton Michael, who are the adjacent property owner on the other side. So sort of the bookend to the Babiar's property. I want to thank you, first of all, for providing for the remote capacity. It's working very well, by the way. So my clients are going to be impacted by this development. They're not friends with the lawyers or the applicants, and so they're a little more at arm's length to it than perhaps some other people who are present. But I will say, I'd like to set the table. There's actually two applications before you. One is that there's a request for several variances, 3 variances, and a second one for a coastal site plan review. They're actually 2 separate matters, although you consider them at the same time. What's interesting is, and the first thing I'd like to say is, in the materials we just heard, the setback, the coastal setback from the critical coastal resource setback, it was described as an interpretation difference. I'd just like to say it's actually not an interpretation difference. It's actually the law. The law says that the critical coastal resource is the beach. That's not an interpretation difference. It's not like, is it a beach or is it not a beach? It's a beach. It simply was, they measured from the wrong place. It was a mistake. And I just don't like it when people sort of try to pretend that it's something non-material. But be that as it may, the real importance here is that the variances require the applicant to prove to you with sufficient specificity that they have a hardship, which they don't have because they elected to do what they're doing. And 2, they have reduced their nonconformities in a meaningful enough way to convince you not to apply the regulations as they're written. I submit to you that the reductions are about as minimal as they could possibly be. These are not the kinds of reductions in nonconformity that are material. They are not in any way substantial. They are technical in nature. One has to concede that they are in fact reductions, but that is all one has to concede. They are moving back, as they said, just I think they said a tad back, or I think a touch further back from the seawall was what they said. And all of the reductions are very minimal. Certainly, if you have the discretion to grant or not grant these variances, and the purpose of granting a variance is for the purpose of the reduction in nonconformities, is where someone has made a meaningful enough reduction in nonconformity that it justifies your saying, well, yeah, we can give you relief from these other things. Because otherwise, if you just look at what they've got, they have an existing home that they can use. It is perfectly functional. They can renovate it. They can't renovate more than 50% without triggering the new regulations, but they can renovate over time, as many other people have done. And that brings me to sort of the third reason that they might be able to get a variance, which is they've raised to you the Mayor Whitman case. Mayor Whitman versus Stanford is a Supreme Court case. I submit to you that perhaps this was maybe not intentionally meant to mislead, but I think they've misinterpreted the case grossly. The Mayor Whitman case does not say that if you meet FEMA, you must get a variance. First of all, even if they met the requirements of Mayor Whitman, they wouldn't be entitled to the variance. You would simply have the discretion to grant it. There's a big difference. So I want you to understand there is no entitlement or reason why this variance must be granted. But I do submit to you that they haven't met the requirements of Mayor Whitman. Mayor Whitman differs in a very material respect. The Mayor Whitman case was a house on the shoreline in Stamford, which was damaged in one of the big storms, either Sandy or Irene, I don't remember. And the house was destroyed such that it could not be built unless it met the new requirements. What the court said in that case was, well, yes, you have to meet FEMA because the FEMA regs apply to what you're building. 2, you can also, as a matter of constitutional law, you have a right to keep what you've got. It was a non-conforming structure. And so therefore, the court combined those two things to say, you had a destroyed house, you have a right to rebuild it. You have a right to reutilize that same thing that you have. In other words, you can't be deprived of the use of that, the continued use. But in this case, the owners have chosen to destroy their own house. Obviously, we call that demolishing it, but that's what it is. They're destroying it and rebuilding it. They're not entitled to destroy and then claim that because new regulations apply when they do that, that they're entitled to a variance. That's a big difference. In fact, what they're citing Mayor Whitman for is not what this case is about. Elective choice of rebuilding your home is something that you do at your own risk. When these folks bought their home, they presumably were aware of the regulations that would apply. And presumably, they knew that if they renovated, they would have to comply with various things. Therefore, when they made the election to demolish as opposed to renovate, they made an election to need to have a variance despite the fact that they're not entitled to it. And so I want to emphasize that nothing about Mayor Whitman requires the granting of the variance. And any suggestion to the contrary is not what the law says. So let me actually take a quote from Mayor Whitman. The Supreme Court actually said the Sea Cottage in that case could not be built. Thus, the underlying purpose of the variance is to expand the nonconformities of the Sea Cottage, but not to expand the nonconformities, but merely to allow its continued use. In that case, what was important to the Supreme Court was that they not be deprived of what they had. In this case, no one would be depriving them of what they have. They could move. Presumably, they live there now, or presumably they can continue to use it as it is. So moving on, the Mayor Whitman case also talks about that variances must be shown not to affect substantially the comprehensive zoning plan, and adherence to the strict letter of the zoning ordinance must be shown to cause unusual hardship unnecessary to the carrying out of the general purpose of the zoning plan. Proof of exceptional difficulty or unusual hardship is absolutely necessary as a condition precedent to the granting of a zoning variance. They don't have hardship. They just don't. There is no exceptional difficulty that was not self-created. The owners so if they're going with a reduction of nonconformity, the owners could have done something substantial that upon which they could have appealed to you and said, look, we've done something meaningful here. They could have, but chose not to, move the deck and the house structure out of the FEMA VE flood zone. Now, remember what's important about that is this isn't an inland variance. This is a coastal variance where the Coastal Area Management Act applies. So one of the primary reason for the CAM Act review is that you're supposed to take into account the flood elevation compliance. While they're complying with the elevation, they still have the option of moving the house back out of the active wave zone, because that only gets worse. The VE 13 and VE 14, which exists on the site, they could move the house out. But the reason why they can't move the house back is because they put in a 50-foot pool. That was an election that they made. They could have made it materially better, but they didn't. They also could have centered the house on the lot better. And that's particularly important to my clients because they're already crowded. But there are better alternatives to the proposed activity that would be more honest improvements to current conditions, or more improvements to nonconformities, eliminating the pool or reducing the pool in its size, centering the house on the lot to reduce crowding, replacing the proposed hardscape retaining walls and with vegetated landscaping. The proposed retaining walls will almost certainly impair surface water flowage and stormwater flowage from and across neighboring properties. That's important because under the CAM Act, the impediments to stormwater flowage are known as a shoreline flood and erosion control structure, which is part of Madison's regulations. It's in 22A 109C, which says that, and I'll quote here, a shoreline flood and erosion control structure is any structure that has the effect of impacting flooding or erosion from tidal waters, which this is, and including, and it says breakwaters, bulkheads, but it says seawalls and the placement of concrete, rocks, or other significant barriers to the flow of floodwaters or the movement of sediments along the shoreline. Your commission has to decide whether the retaining walls that they have placed, and these are substantially long retaining walls that are parallel to the boundary lines, perpendicular to the sound. And if there is a serious storm where storm flowage comes across, it's going to bounce off those walls and deflect the waves back against somebody else's property. The whole point of not having shoreline flood and erosion control structures, unless absolutely necessary, is to avoid creating greater damage to somebody else at somebody else's expense. And in this case, building retaining walls that are basically stone walls that are broadside to waves that might cross the property during a storm, that's going to impact neighboring properties. And there's been absolutely no engineering analysis of that effect. You have not been presented with the sufficient information upon which you could make a determination of whether or not that effect would occur. And that's important because 25.3.6, the commission may approve, modify, or deny the application, but the commission shall make a written finding that the proposed activity with any conditions or modifications is consistent with all the applicable goals and policies of the Coastal Area Management Act, and incorporates as conditions or modifications all reasonable measures which will mitigate adverse impacts. First, there's no information about what the adverse impacts may or may not be, or the severity of them. And there's been no information about the reasonable measures which could have been taken. There's actually been no analysis, period, about these retaining walls. I think they missed the issue. I don't think they hid it from you. I think they just missed it. And if you continue the Coastal Area Management Act, which governs your coastal site plan review, 22A93 sub 15, adverse impacts to coastal resources includes degrading natural erosion patterns, the significant alteration of littoral transport of sediments, degrading existing drainage patterns, or the significant alteration of groundwater or recharge, and increasing the hazard of coastal flooding through significant alteration of shoreline configurations of bathymetry, which is basically the surface geometry, particularly within high velocity flood zones. So you've got walls here that are changing the landscape and providing a broadside to stormwater flowage. I could go on. There's the attached garage. The attached garage is not an attached garage in any honest sense. The applicants have proposed that the garage is attached to the house by a pergola. Now, I say this in all sincerity. Would the board consider a house connected to a garage by a single piece of lumber to be attached? How about attaching a garage by a clothesline? I mean, how minimal does an attachment have to be before it's really not an attached garage? This is not one. They basically took a 50-foot pergola and ran it down the deck of their pool, connected it to the side of the garage and said, see, it's attached. You may differ with me, but the first thing that struck me about that was that's really not an honest attachment of a garage. I don't think anybody sitting in the audience would say, oh yeah, that's really attached. But I raise that for your consideration. The owners have chosen to add a fairly large pool structure, which is an amenity, and you're entitled to one if you can fit it. But because they've placed that there, it limits their ability to do the things that would meaningfully impact the potential for storm water deflection of energy to adjacent properties. The site's in an A13 flood zone. The coast, this is a coastal high hazard zone where flooding would be expected. The applicant hasn't provided you with the analysis. And if anywhere where regulations need to be followed, it's in the high hazard zone, where wave impacts can not only do damage, but if deflected, can do additional damage to somebody who doesn't have that protection. And the idea is not to have everybody build a wall to try to deflect it onto the next guy. That's kind of common sense. So I leave you with the, I think the thought that, that the applicant hasn't met hardship. They haven't meaningfully reduced nonconformity such that you should be convinced that, oh yeah, we should waive meaningful parts of the zoning regulations. And they haven't really met the requirements of the Mayor Whitman case, which says if your house gets destroyed, you can rebuild it because you would otherwise be deprived of that pre-existing use. Here, they were the storm that destroyed their own house, or they're about to. They don't have to do that. And because of that, Mayor Whitman doesn't apply. It's just not an applicable case. So with that, I guess I'll just say, I don't believe they merit the granting of the variance. It's going to impact my clients and the neighborhood. Aesthetically, I don't challenge the fact that they're probably making a beautiful house. That's not really the issue. And whether or not it's been well designed in terms of aesthetics isn't really the issue. This is about coastal management. If you're that close to the coastal area resources, we should be retreating from them, not holding our ground, defying what is the inevitable, and then simply claiming that we're retreating because we moved back 2 feet. That doesn't merit the kind of relief that they're asking for. And I apologize if I went long, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ainsworth. Are there any further comments from the audience before we move into our closed session?
Mr. Vice Chair, following comments from the public, it's standard to allow the applicant an opportunity to respond.
Would the applicant like to respond?
We would. I hope you can hear me because I'm simply going to turn this part over to Mr. Fettis to respond to the engineering issues that were raised, particularly having to do with flood and soil erosion barriers and the like, and to comment on the deep review of this very same plan.
So good evening, Greg Fettis, professional engineer licensed in the state of Connecticut, an office at 70 Essex Street in Mystic, Connecticut. Just to clarify, we are in a VE 14 zone as well as an AE 13 zone, but we're also in what's called a LIMWA zone, which is a limited wave action zone. The entire site is pretty much within that. So moving back 10, 20, 30, 50 feet, it's not going to make a difference to the design of the house, the pool, or the garage. All of those structures are on piers. There are no retaining walls on site. The only wall we have is the seawall that's in front of the house, which both neighbors on either side have a similar seawall. So I'm not sure where, we don't have any erosion control structures. The seawall could be depicted as one, but that's existing and has been there for a long time. So again, no retaining walls on site, no interior erosion control structures. Water is allowed to overtop the seawall and basically go underneath the house, the pool, as well as the garage. So moving any of that would not make a difference to the design. The deep letter doesn't agree with the attorney that spoke. They, in fact, it was a very positive letter that kind of said we're doing a good job by complying with the Coastal Management Act. So I'm not sure exactly where he's coming from on that. So, is there anything I missed, Michael?
This is the.
Any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Does anybody on the board have additional questions that may have risen from the last two comments?
No one
Thank you
has.
very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Fettis.
I'd like to say something. Alona Marsh, 31 Fairfield
If you
Avenue.
could, You're the property owner?
I'm a property owner. And I just want to talk a little bit about this idea that I could keep this house and live in this house. I had an incredibly poor inspection on this house. The intent was to keep the house, and it doesn't have proper structural support underneath it. There was mold throughout the house. I've remediated it so I can use it, but I haven't done the full remediation because the plan was to renovate. The front porch slopes, the back, they closed the front porch, so front part of the house slopes down towards the street. The back part of the house slopes down towards the water. There's a hill in the living room, like a little mountain. There's nothing level. The first floor roof, for the second floor level, literally is sloping. The support beams that they put in are across the house are not supported by anything visually. They literally land on a door frame. When you go to the upstairs of the house, it's like being in a fun house. The hallway bathroom slopes down towards the street. The upstairs hallway actually slopes towards the banister. I have concerns about guests in the house. There are parts of the floor that you feel like you're just going to go through. It's not a livable house as is. It needs to be renovated. And so I have to disagree with the attorney when he talks about it being a decision that I'm making intentionally and that the case law doesn't apply. I think the case law fully applies to this case. I think that they envisioned when they were writing that case that it would also apply to those of us who need to raise our houses because of the rules of how much you can invest in a structure that's not FEMA compliant. I think that the reason why you don't invest in a structure that's not FEMA compliant, and I think it's laughable that an attorney that claims to be an environmental attorney is going to stand before you and tell you I'm not making radical changes to this house when I'm raising it in order to be FEMA compliant. Yes, I can do a little bit of my kitchen this year. And yes, I can do a bathroom next year. And yes, the following year I can do a bathroom. I can do that. I can live with the hills and valleys. But I think that what we want as a community is that these houses come into as much conformity as we can. It's a very strange lot. And we did our best to try to be, as my neighbor John said, conforming to the community, making the house fit in, making the house a small, livable part of the community. And we've tried really hard to do that. And we've tried really hard to be good neighbors along the way. And so I kind of reject that part, that the house is livable as is. It's not. It needs a full gut renovation. It was a rental for many, many years. My neighbors come up to me and they're so grateful, even of the gardening I've done in it, because it's a blight in the neighborhood. I find it kind of ironic that the people with the biggest house on the block are coming in here and saying things like we're being dishonest or we're being misleading or anything like that. We had a very open discussion about a measurement number last time, and the zoning officer told us where it should be measured from. And so really at great cost to us in terms of time, because we won't ever be done by next summer now, we made the change and we went away quietly and we've done what you've asked and we're trying really hard. And so there's no part of us that are ever trying to be dishonest or misleading. We've only tried to be forthright this whole time. Thank you.
And just on a final note, in fact, the reductions in nonconformity are not insubstantial. There's several areas that were non-conforming and now they are, and that matters. And likewise, a simple example is the building code, which was 16%, a full percent over what was allowed in a place where that mattered. And now it's 14.7% and it's compliant, along with all the other things that we've brought to your attention. Thank you very much. If you have any other questions with our team, we're still all here.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. I'd like to move to close the public session and go into deliberations.
You need a motion or you making a motion?
I made a motion. I'd like to move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so I'm going to start here. There's two reasons as Mr. Ainsworth, presented. That there's two reasons for us to be able to grant a variance. The first one is an abnormal, or it's a hardship, right? And usually it's got to do with the shape of the land. Somebody's got 2 front yards, or it's missing a side yard. You have a triangular shaped property with a pre-existing house that you need to do work on, so on and so forth. The second one is a reduction of nonconformances, and one of my biggest issues with how a reduction in nonconformances is phrased is that there's no way to quantify the reduction, and there's no way to identify the quality of the reduction in nonconformity. I see a big reduction in nonconformity for, was it lot coverage, right? We're now conforming to lot coverage, whereas we weren't before. That's, to me, that's a big reduction, right? You don't have an overbuilt home on a lot that is not, zoned to have a home that is that large. I think that previously, when we looked at these plans, if we were to build the house completely within the side yard setbacks, it would be a rather narrow home. It'd be able to kind of fit the square footage, and then you could have a lot more bulk on top, on the second floor. I think the big concern for me is going to be this coastal resource setback. It's equivalent to what was there. And I mean, a foot less. And I think that's where our trade is going to, our trade-off is going to be with, we have a slight reduction in that coastal resource setback, or the critical coastal resource setback. And we have a reduction that actually brings the home into conformity as far as, square footage. Right now I am, since we are, keeping the status quo here, for all intents and purposes on the coastal resource setback, and we haven't had a negative feedback on the coastal site plan. I'm leaning toward staying with status quo and having the blessing of deep to grant this. But I'd like to see if any of you guys have anything that can sway me. I'm slightly over the edge. I'm not digging in my heels. Just is there something that somebody here is going to say is going to sway me?
I don't know that I would sway you one way or the other, Jason. I'm a little bit torn here myself. Likewise, I don't see the idea of the hardship when part of the result is to get a swimming pool in there.
Yeah.
The hardship itself becomes a little bit of a stretch there. On the other hand, I don't really understand how the effect of the seawall on neighbors really, there's nothing changing about that. It's already there. So I'm not sure why that's an objection. And yet, we do have some reduction in non-conformances, conformities. So we got, I don't see the hardship side, but we do have some reduction in non-conformities. So
Yeah, I don't think there's a hardship. Right, but
I
it's,
mean, I understand and I empathize with the discomfort of the house, but
I mean, so the way that I see it too is they're allowed to knock it down and rebuild the same house that's FEMA compliant, right? In the exact same footprint. Right, so if they were to knock it down and rebuild the exact same footprint, we'd have no issues with a pool. Right, we'd have, there would be no issues with the pool. They could put that in. There's still no issues with the pool. There's an issue with the garage being, 3.5 feet off the property line. The old garage was, I'm trying to look in here. Very similar to, it was 4.5 feet off the property line. So we've gotten a little bit closer on the garage. Yeah.
Increases value.
Right, the garage is 4.5, it's 3.5 now. So
I can screen share that if you'd like.
can you zoom in on the what is it, the southwestern corner of the garage is where it's marked at 4.5
For the existing,
for the existing.
it's 4 point, that's an elevation.
Oh, is that an elevation?
Those are spot on. Nope, that's a distance.
Yeah.
Point,
I see leaders.
no, it's 3.3.
The
It's
4.4 is
3.3
elevation,
feet.
3.3.
The X 4.4 is a spot elevation,
Okay.
Jason, that you're reading. It's 3.3 feet existing.
Yeah, so it's 3.3 feet and we're going to 3.5 feet. So we're getting further away at however nominally it is, right? That's doing better on the non-conformance. I think, I don't particularly understand the argument against the attached garage. Aaron, I would assume that if it was a detached garage, it would be considered an outbuilding, and then we would have to have what, 1 foot for every foot that we are up to the eaves.
It would be a variance for an accessory structure in the front yard.
As opposed to,
The
yeah,
attachment, the zoning regulations allow for the attachment of a structure.
right. So I don't know that, I've seen attached, my garage is attached to be a breezeway. And so it's not, an outbuilding. It's whether I like it or not, it's something that people do and it's allowable.
breezeway is
Yeah, I mean, it's my garage, it doesn't matter, but this is something that people do. And, whether I like it or not isn't, the law is that it's attached. I don't know, Bill, do you have anything?
Do you have anything, Bill?
Yeah. My observation is, I kind of agree here. I don't really see the hardship. I question that. I don't understand it in this case. Also, you still have 3 variances. You have the house on the west side and on the east side, which is out of the required setback, and the garage on the west side is still out of the required setback. Yes, you had one small reduction in the non-compliance on the house on the west side, going from 9.2 to 11.75. So yes, you had a reduction there. And you did eliminate one nonconformity in the coverage. So my problem is you still got 3 variances there. And if you had demolished the house and kept it in the same footprint, you could keep all these variances and not really have to come before the board. So those are my thoughts.
John?
Yeah, I would agree with that situation. I believe that current footprint is suitable, and pool is it's a nice addition, but
John, excuse me, if you could speak up or use the microphone, we might have to click it on.
It's
Has a hard time sometimes picking up.
the mic was never on.
I did take a look at the property, and you heard the comments of the next door neighbor last time about you being blocked with the new proposal, which, as some say, I would say, in relation to the neighborhood, how the house is going to affect, perhaps the house can be moved back. I think there is something that can be talked about. That's kind of, I don't think it's something that's fixed currently. Plans are still being made and so forth, so maybe there is an adjustment that can be made that would satisfy all parties.
So I'm gonna probably vote yes. I haven't, there's nothing that's really swayed me. I think that the reduction, I would vote yes based on the complete elimination of one nonconformity and slight reductions in other nonconformities that they're asking for the variances for. I think that very similar to when we, and this is going to get into the non-technical reasons, looking at the complete application package, I think that the proposed structure and modification line up similarly in comparison to where the other houses are that are next to it. It's not like they're not looking for a non-conform for a variance that is going to put the house 40 feet closer to the water line, or 20 feet closer to the water line. The measurement is roughly similar, from the seawall to the structure of the house, as it was with the pre-existing structure. So that's not going to sway me. Last month, my concern was that we were not comparing apples to apples when we were talking about variances, as the drawings have on them. And now we're comparing apples to apples from the old drawing to the new drawing. And I, don't believe that, that minor reduction is, like I said before, there's the law doesn't give us direction on how to quantify, the size of a reduction and what that exact quantification needs. It gives us the ability to interpret that and approve based on what we think. So I would put my vote toward yes, approval of the coastal site plan based on the review that we've gotten from DEEP and the approval of all the variances that are attached to this application.
So I would like to mention with the variances, Attorney Ainsworth had characterized them as minimal, but you're on a property with a very narrow property, and there's not much leeway to go to reduce anything on the, the side setbacks. Just you get, you get a spaghetti string eventually by the time you're done with it. The setback from the coastal line is just about almost 2 feet, which is it's not a major reduction in conformity, but it is reduction, and it's moderate, given the room you've got to play with. And then the reduction in the square footage is certainly that's fairly significant. So I see it as a reduction of non-conformities.
Mhm. Okay. Do we want to discuss the coastal site plan, or is everybody okay with the coastal site plan being okayed by deep?
I have no comment.
No, so everybody's okay with it? All right, do we want to vote here? Or do we need to discuss this a little bit more? Dennis, you're my barometer for what's in the room.
Bill or John?
If either of you has a additional feeling of, I'm sorry, if you have a feeling on which has a priority here with the idea that, they didn't stick at the same footprint, but they do have a reduction in conformity, is it enough to justify this? I think that's a big question. And are there other issues?
Well, like I said before, you still have the 3 variances there. You only had a minor reduction in the garage variance. Plus, there's no hardship, or at least I don't see it. And then, like you said, on the coastal setback, I don't know if that's, I mean, I think the town is 50 feet, and we're 28. So I just think, you still have a lot of issues here.
John?
Yeah, I do agree that I don't see any hardship in this situation.
Are the variances adequate? What do you think?
I do see reduction, square footage and so forth, and which would reduce the original footprint, but I'm concerned that there's no hardship.
Okay. Well, should we go?
Yeah, we should vote.
We have to. leave
Yeah,
the-
so I moved to go back to public deliberation or the public session.
You don't need to.
No? Okay.
No. Make a motion following your deliberations. You're not in executive session or anything.
So I'm gonna move to approve the variance based on a reduction in the total amount of nonconformities and the elimination of the square footage nonconformity.
You have any stipulations to go with that?
I don't know. As presented.
Second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thanks for.
We-
Abstained?
No, you gotta decide.
Thank you.
Okay.
We called the vote.
I don't know. My gut feeling is I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to oppose.
So all recorded, we have 3 yes, 1 no. The motion or the application is not approved.
Mr. Vice Chair, we're also going to need a motion regarding the coastal site plan application.
Okay. I move that we approve the coastal site plan as it is, that I move that the zoning board of appeals approves the coastal site plan for this application.
I'll second.
Can you
Do I need
state
you?
findings with your resolution?
Oh, yeah. So I move that the coastal site plan is consistent. Let me read it. As per deep, the coastal site plan. Let me just copy their words. I move that we approve the coastal site plan and based on the fact that it is consistent with the, what is it, the plan of. There, we used to have specific words for this, is that correct?
You're referring to consistency with the coastal area?
Yes, with the Coastal Resources Management Act.
For any specific reasons?
Yes, the Department of Environmental Protection gave a positive recommendation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So that's 4.
Okay, motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, Mr. Vice Chair, is 23-14, 27 Kent Road. Applicant is Heather Collette here on behalf of the applicant. In conference room is Robert Sonicson of Waldo and Associates. He's the engineer of record.
You want to swear me in?
Yes, and Jason, if we could seat Dylan for
Yes.
the remainder of the meeting, please.
Excellent. Dylan, consider yourself seated as the 5th member of the Zoning Board of Appeals for September 12th.
Thank you for reminding me.
Increasing his value.
This volume, all right, let me check for volume.
It's a little hard of hearing.
This volume is maxed. I believe.
I can speak, is it just me you cannot hear, Bill? I can speak louder.
Yeah, you're the one.
Yeah, could you? I'm having.
My best. How's this volume? Is this okay?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay. I turned the gain way up on my microphone.
Okay, and I will
It's not
get
turned on.
your documents. You're starting with the site plan?
Starting with the site.
You can identify, sorry.
Good evening, my name is Rob Sonicson. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I work with Waldo and Associates in Guilford, Connecticut, and I'm the engineer of record on the project at 27 Kent Road that we'll be hearing tonight. I have a colored site plan that I don't think is part of the electronic package that you have, but I don't know exactly whether that's going to make a difference. Can you share the screen on the? Aaron read the public notice. This is a request for variance to section 12.6 to enlarge an existing non-conforming use. The total of the non-conforming expansion is 234 square feet. Variance to section 3.6A to allow 19.1 foot front yard setback where 25 feet is required. You can see the existing front yard setback at 25 and the existing house within the front 5 feet essentially of that front yard setback area. There's also a nonconformance to the existing porch, which is of significance here because just, I don't want to wander too much, but this house was built in 1900 at the time, and the house next door to it was built in 1900. There's an accessory building on the site that was built in 1920. This was the time that Webster Point and the Penn Road area were being developed, and the houses are quite similar down here. We call them, many of them are pre-World War I cottages, and the Colette's house is a splendid example. I have the architectural drawings and I'll be able to show them to you later on. The third variance is a side yard setback variance of 7.8 feet where 12 feet is required. And the reason for the variances is to allow the expansion of a second floor above the first floor on of the residence. The existing residence is essentially a single floor residence with two small, very small bedrooms up in the under the eaves, and they're seeking to not add any bedrooms. It's currently a 3-bedroom house, but they want to modify the first floor and put 3 useful bedrooms in the second floor, all above the existing 1900 footprint of the existing house. Colette's purchased the property in March of 2022. In June of 2022, the owner merged 2 lots, lots 23 and 27, which made the property much more compliant with the existing zoning, R5 zoning. The combined lot area is 11,927 square feet, and the minimum in an R5 zone is 7,000 square feet. So the first thing that they did was make their property more conforming, and they've been working toward improving the conformance of their property since then. This is a coastal site plan application, and I wanted to go through the coastal site plan considerations next, unless you'd like me to discuss the variances further. The property is located entirely within the coastal area. The most significant coastal resource is the tidal wetlands. There's a system of tidal wetlands that essentially run along the eastern property boundary of the property, which is part of the Thomas Creek estuary. The closest point that the tidal wetlands is located to the existing steps on the deck is 57.8 feet. So the current footprint of the house and the deck as it's existed for many, many years, is greater than the critical coastal resource on the property. And that's important as we're going to be going forward and looking at the reason for the variances and the hardships that exist here. The second coastal resource of significance in the site is coastal flood hazards. The entire property is located in the flood hazard area designated on the current flood insurance rate map. The existing house is not compliant with all of the currently effective flood hazard building requirements because the area of the basement, there's an area of basement underneath the entire existing building. It is subgrade on all sides, which makes it a basement. And the way that the flood rules are designed, the lowest floor of a structure is either its first floor or basement if it's subgrade on any of its sides. So while the first floor elevation is at elevation 12.4 and the 100-year flood elevation is 11, the house is not compliant because the basement is considered to be the lowest floor in accordance with flood zone standards. The proposed project has been designed to comply with all of the flood zone standards, however, because we are proposing to fill in the basement area, which is at elevation 4.9. The exterior grade is at 6. We'll fill the basement floor in 1 foot to raise it to the grade of the existing grade, making the house what's called an elevated structure. Therefore, the first floor at 12.4 is now the lowest floor in accordance with basic building code requirements and the floodplain management requirements. And so now what we have is a first floor that's 0.4 of a foot higher than the basic building code requirement, which is 1 foot above the base flood elevation. I could explain that more, but the fact of the matter is that we went to great lengths to make this house fully compliant with flood zone standards. And it causes some disadvantages because the clets are tall and the basement was deep enough so that they could get down there and do some things. But now it's truly going to be almost like a crawl space. But we had to do that to meet the flood zone standards. In addition to raising the basement floor, we're adding flood vents around the outside, which is another requirement of flood zone compliance. So we're meeting all of the standards of the local floodplain regulations and the Connecticut Basic Building Code. And we think that that's a significant improvement to the property in terms of overall compliance with the regulations. Those are the two most significant coastal resources, floodplain and tidal wetlands. The tidal wetlands are also associated with nearshore waters, but we're not going to have any impact on those nearshore waters. We're not increasing the impervious surface on the site at all, so there won't be any increase in stormwater or any impact potential that's any different than the current conditions on the tidal wetlands. So in our opinion, the proposed project is completely consistent with the policies and guidance of the Connecticut Coastal Area Management Act. I'm going to show you to give you an opportunity, and I don't know whether you want to follow on the architecturals. I just wanted to show, since there was presentations on the architecturals and other presentations, I wanted to show some examples of what's being proposed with the house and how it's been designed to be in keeping with the neighborhood to be in keeping with the character of the Pent Road and Webster Point area, and to be in keeping with many of the surrounding houses. There are a lot of two level houses. This one happens to be, this is the front view, with a very large open porch, which is sort of, from a streetscape perspective, representative of what Pent Road is all about down here. And everybody, anyone who's driven down here has seen this house, and it's really it's the porch that makes it a significant structure. It was the style of the time, and it's sort of in keeping with the history and the character of this area. The porch is going to stay completely, and what we're doing simply is raising and elevating and providing useful second floor space above the existing footprint, not exceeding the existing footprint in any case, maintaining the existing pre-existing nonconformances that were in place. And the reason that they were in place was that this house was built in 1900 and it greatly preceded any of the zoning regulations. But the house is of significance historically, and it's the applicant's strong interest in maintaining it and not having to demolish it or diminish its significance in any way. So that's the front view of the house. I don't know whether I can show you the side view is in page. You're faster than I am here.
Racing.
Does the board have any interest in seeing the floor plans? They're really not changing very much. There's going to be a new deck that's going to have the same configuration of the old deck. The footprint is staying exactly the same. It's proposed to stay exactly the same as the existing historic structure. The covered porch is going to stay the same. The dining room and the kitchen are going to be in the same location, but there's a single bedroom on the first floor that's now going to be converted to a playroom. And it's done in a way that meets the health code standards with regard to openings into the room. So it's not considered to be a bedroom any longer. And that's the one big change on the first floor of the structure. And then I think I have the proposed second floor has what was two small bedrooms that were, you could barely stand up in. And now there's going to be a new bathroom and three normal sized bedrooms, all completely above the footprint of the existing house. The last elevations show the this is the existing front elevation, the proposed front elevation again. The existing rear, this is looking from Tom's Creek and the wetlands up toward the house and the deck in the back. And this is the new rear view with the second floor simply placed on top of the existing first floor. And these are the sides. As you can see, this is the left side looking from the driveways at the side of the house with the porch in the front and the deck in the back, all the same footprint, simply adding usable living space on the second floor. And that's those are the architectural drawings. The hardship is primarily the result of the fact that the property was developed many years before the establishment of zoning. Relocating the house on the property. We'll go back to beach. We'll go back to the first site. Relocating the house to eliminate these variances would have some significant negative impacts. First of all, if we were going to deal with the front yard variance requirement, we'd be moving the house back closer to the critical coastal resources. And it would be very difficult to avoid not impinging upon that 50-foot critical coastal resource. We have about 7.5 feet to play with before we get to that. And it seems that, and the site slopes down, the siting of the house is a more appropriate location for all sorts of technical reasons. And there's another, and then the other option would be to move the house further to the north. And moving the house further to the north has some very significant negative impacts on the view shed of people who live on the west side of Pent Road. They have a nice view of the tidal marsh, a view corridor right through the center of the property. If we moved it to the north to try to, the corridor is narrowed down and it has a negative impact on the neighbors in their view. So moving the house also would basically be demolishing the house. It's an old house. It can be structurally reinforced, but if they start trying to move it, it's basically a tear down, rebuild, start from scratch. And the architectural design worked very hard to maintain the character and the feeling of this old cottagey house that's consistent with the style here on Pent Road and in Webster Point. Now, in addition to what I just said, I think it's important to indicate that in the file, there are 3 letters from 3 of the closest neighbors supporting the application. The adjacent owner to the immediately to the south that is closest to the 7.5 foot building variance is said that she's much in favor of the project, as well as the person who lives directly across the street. So that's kind of a, and they both also said that they really think that the Colette's have done a great job with this property since they've bought it. They're consistently trying to improve it, and they want to continue to improve it. So it's our position that the plan before you tonight is consistent with the coastal development policies and will retain the character of the neighborhood and result in an appropriate improvement to the property at 27 Pent Road. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding the application. I wanted to ask Aaron, we did not get a letter. I didn't see a letter from the Connecticut DEP.
We may not have responded in time.
Because I was sort of we were looking for it. We made a couple of comments, a couple of contacts, and we were told that we were going to get it as soon as it came in, but I didn't see it today.
I have not received one.
Okay.
They did not respond in time.
Okay. Well, that concludes my presentation for tonight. And we'd be happy to answer questions, or if the applicant would like to say anything, obviously. But that hopefully covers the coastal area management issues, as well as our consideration for why this is a significant hardship, unless we are able to gain the variances that we requested. Thank you.
So I do have a question. No changes to septic required because same number of bedrooms.
That's correct. It just so happens that there was a septic tank. One of the first things that happened when the property was purchased was there was a septic tank replacement, and the health department came out and took a look at everything. And it was, the rest of the system was fine and acceptable. And that's in the file.
So I think that I heard correctly that we're using the existing foundation from 1900. And the only reason that you're before us is because the existing building, which we're maintaining, right, we're not knocking it down. So that the existing building is non-conforming and therefore we need to be here so we can approve the second floor expansion on top of the pre-existing non-conforming structure. That's correct?
That's correct. There will be some reinforcement to some of the walls down in the basement and some of the interior walls simply for structural, strengthening, but there will not be any change to any of the
So
dimensions.
we're not lifting the original house. We're not changing it in any way, shape or form. We're just expanding the second floor. Sorry, I'm getting very handsy.
That's very true.
Thank you.
But also the filling in the basement sufficient to.
To make it an elevated structure. That's a sort of one of those technical things. Elevated structures are built at grade, allow floodwaters to enter and recede. And you can use it, the area for limited storage. But you have to, the second point here is that the utilities that are currently in the basement are going to be relocated to the upper floors, up under the eaves.
Water tank, things like that.
Yeah, and so that's going to be a great improvement because while they haven't experienced a lot of flooding, it's elevation 6. And Tom's Creek does flood, and it's much improved situation to have the utilities at a higher elevation and prevent it from further any flood damage.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
This is something, so none of the setbacks are being intensified, right? None of the setbacks are being intensified?
None of the setbacks being intensified?
No.
Yeah, they are not.
Well, this is something I've always, kind of confused about. You're adding more space, more building on the setback. So even though the dimensions aren't changing, you're still, I guess, in a way intensifying it. If it makes any sense, I'm not sure what the legal technicality is there. Maybe I can get some clarification on that.
We would call it an expansion of a nonconformity. It's a vertical expansion or mass up. And that's specific from municipality to municipality, really. There are some municipalities that allow expansion vertically of a non-conforming setback. Current, our regulations prohibit that. So that would trigger the need for the variance.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Anybody else?
No, we have no other questions from the board. I see one hand raised on the Zoom. Are there any comments from the crowd in the fishbowl?
No. Yes?
Absolutely. You thought you were gonna get away scot-free.
Of course. Can you speak? Yeah, we'll give you the microphone if you need it. If you could just identify yourself for the record, please.
I'm trying not to, but I will in this case. My name is Bruce McIntyre. My wife Renee is at home watching the same situation as we are here. We live at 57 Pent Road, so we are the last house on Pent Road. knew the previous owners, where you guys are living now. And our architect too was in the back, so don't pay any attention to him. But at any rate, I first want to say there's a big difference between neighbors and neighborhoods. And one of the wonderful things about you guys is that you're true neighbors. You believe in being a part of, and we've had a wonderful richness of that along Penn Road. Whether it's hurricanes or you name it, or rebuilding the fencing, or when the town didn't have any money, shocker, trying to figure out how we could take all the sand, because when Irene came in, the opposite happened. Normally you get all the sand eroding, and it did, but for a different reason. It was, the sand was pushed up right against Tom's Creek and the entry, that whole jetty. Well, the first tide, when it's coming in, didn't have a place to go. So it took out the whole beach within a week. Because with all that from the hurricane, there was all that. Everybody banded together. I mean, we started rebuilding. I can remember we got our last step of rebuilding the beach was, and it was all the neighbors that did it. In fact, the old house needed so much help that one neighbor said, "Oh, I've got another house down in Darien, and we can reshingle the whole house because I've got shingles there." And another guy right across the street said, "I'm a carpenter. I'll take care of him." I mean, it's that kind of a neighborhood, and where everybody works together, and there's no noses up in the air. It's just like and that's why I say it's so nice to have a true neighborhood. And you guys are a very important part of it, and you've shown it along the way. So that is pretty much why I want to be here tonight, is to say that, whether it goes up higher or not, as long as the next door, the neighbors across the street, I mean, I think that's very critical. That shows what a true neighbor is. That they're not taking away any of their view of Tom's Creek and the marsh and everything. So when you've got that kind of a thing, I can't understand why there would be an issue with it going up higher. To me, it doesn't bother us at all. We're already too high. And Duo is our architect, so that's a non-issue. So we set the bar for that, and they could go 3 stories, that'd be fine. But I hope that you will take a positive look and understand that this is not your normal Cove community. Everybody on the street always jumps in to help others. I mean, Sal, they're right across the street. We had our invisible fence wire that was ripped out. I'm not even sure how it happened, but it was beeping, and he came, found it, because we couldn't get anybody from Invisible Fence to come out for 4 days. Sal said, "I'll fix it." Half an hour later, it's fixed. That's what we're dealing with here. So when you're thinking about, well, we're going to be making it an eyesore by going up, that's not the issue at all. The issue is, how do we keep this special spirit that is alive in Penn Road? How do we allow it to grow, to continue, and to be what it? I could never think of living another place. And we've lived in Madison since '66. We were on Acorn Road until our last son went off to college. None of them said you can't sell the house. So we waited until then, and now you know where we are. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you for listening to me to go longer than I should have, but they are awesome. I got to tell you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If nobody that's in person has any additional comments? Yes, up front.
I'm Chris McKeon. I'm an attorney for one of the other applications, but I happen to be a resident of the neighborhood of which Bruce just spoke. We took part in planting seagrass after Irene. We go to the beach, we walk by this home all the time. And consistent with what Bruce just said, I'd like to give our support to the project. We're neighbors, and we like everyone to be able to do what they want, so long as they're respecting what other people's wishes are. And this appears to be exactly what that is. So on behalf of my wife and I, we would support the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKeon.
And Mr. Vice Chair, we have Linda Smith.
Yeah.
Audience, Linda, if you could unmute and identify yourself for the record before you speak. Or while you speak, I should say. Can you hear us, Linda?
Hello.
Here you are.
Come up. Hi, this is, I'm Jeff Smith. This is my mother, Linda. She lives at 19 Pent Road, which is the other side. So she owns the land on the other two sides of that property. And I just want to say that we're very in favor of this project.
Yes, it really says that life does go on. Good life does go on. I've been here every summer since I was a baby. So, here, and I'm still here.
Yeah.
Not all year round, but in the summer, certainly. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Mrs.
All right, if we have no further comments or questions from the board, and we have no other public comment.
I have one question.
Yeah, hit it.
Could you restate what the hardship is that we're, that we're looking at for this? I mean, I understand the nature of everything, but the nature is the reduction of conformity, so non-conformity. So, what specific hardship do we have?
Perhaps I can.
Let me address
I was going to go reiterate the fact that the hardship really is born from the fact that this house was sited on this property in the most logical and reasonable way that it could be in 1900. And it is the applicant's intention to maintain the structure and not have to demolish it in order to be able to address the front yard and the side yard setback that exists on the property, that has existed there since 1900 and until the time that the R5 zone was established that said, no, the side yard has to be 12 feet. They built the house, it was 7.8 feet from the property line. So the house.
But there's no hardship if it were just left alone.
If the house, if the
There's no
house,
hardship, there's no need to reduce the conformities if you just leave it alone.
that's correct. They're adding,
So
they're
there's a
seeking.
hardship for adding on.
And the hardship also is that the property, the way that it's currently configured, is not a practicable, useful 3-bedroom house. And their desire is to create a useful second floor in the house by simply raising adding additional area to the footprint, not further expanding. And it can't architecturally be, we couldn't say, okay, move the second floor in
Well, I get that.
X feet.
I know what
They
I
can't,
want to know what the statement is for.
they can't build a second floor on top of this building without maintaining those setbacks.
Or you want to read what's stated in the.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I see the hardship. And I see one hardship in the fact that, you're trying to, this house was built in 1900 or 1920, and obviously that was way before zoning, so pre-zoning. So that's one hardship. Now, the other hardship I see is that if you tear down the house and try to relocate the house within the land has a peculiar shape to it. It has a slope that goes down. And if you build it in a certain direction, I think you're closer to the marsh. So you really don't have much options there. So the second hardship, I would say, is the peculiar shape of the existing land. So the first hardship is pre-zoning. And since the house was built in 1920. And the second hardship is the peculiar shape and characteristics of the land. And this is not a hardship, but what you did with expanding this house upward, you also made it fully compliant in the flood zone standards. So there's a positive there, obviously.
And in addition, what we've heard here tonight also from the neighbors is a very important, incredibly important. And that is that maintaining the views, maintaining the characteristics. The front porch on this structure is iconic in the neighborhood, and moving the house would completely change that.
So I get that.
Eliminate.
I get that, but what's the hardship that demands that the house be added on to?
The house is not a functional 3-bedroom house as it exists today. And the applicant needs to make the 3 bedrooms functional, and that the only way they can do that is by moving them upstairs. In addition to that, they're moving all the utilities that are in a currently flood-prone area. They're eliminating the hazard of those upstairs to eliminate a real danger. And that's a hardship.
Yes.
Maintaining the existing structure.
Yeah, that's true. And then the increased flood, what's the hardship as stated in the application?
I got that here.
I didn't think when I read it that I really.
Yeah. What conditions especially affect this parcel? Well, okay. The current house was sited on the parcel in 1900, according to the Madison property card, long before modern zoning. If zoning had existed, it would have been feasible to locate the house in a manner compliant with the current front and side yard setbacks. Relocating the entire house now would impose undue hardship on the owner, require total demolition of an historical structure, block views of the joiners across the street, and result in significantly detrimental effects on the neighborhood.
Yeah. So when I read that, I said, okay, but that doesn't explain why the house has to be modified in the first place. And I think what you've said gives a little more clarity here. The fact is, the application itself did not contain a hardship. Okay, but you've said, okay, it's not functional, rooms are too small to be actually used as bedrooms in the modern sense of what we expect of bedrooms, standards for them and so on. And then moving the appliances out of a flood zone. Right. That's always the hardest part.
Yeah, it is.
It's like pulling teeth sometimes to get somebody to go through the hardship. Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to, so you, I think Bill mentioned this, and I think you mentioned it too, the incline and the marshes in the land, because that would actually be a hardship in a traditional sense. So, can you speak more about those two things again, just so we can have some, like, how is that affecting the property and, you know, possibly preventing you from building it more in compliance with the setbacks?
The deck on the back of the house, and the house is a reasonably sized, it's not a large house by any stretch of the imagination on the first floor. Is 57.8 feet from the critical coastal resource currently. If we were to shift the house back the 20, the 5 feet that are that we are encroaching on the setback, you're going to essentially eliminate that. You're moving the house in the opposite direction that you would want to move the house from a coastal resource protection perspective. Moving the house toward the coastal resource is not the way that you'd want to move it. And we feel that leaving the house where it currently is also critically important to saving the house. So those are the two reasons that make that moving the house in that direction a hardship.
Okay. I think.
Okay. John, did you have any?
Well, there were questions I noticed where the engineer asked, is there variance required to continue with the front porch nonconformity? Is there variance required to continue with stone steps? Assuming that's part of it.
I would assume as long as they're not touching. Don't work with it, don't fix it.
The question was whether or not a variance was needed for the front porch or the front steps. Those are existing nonconformities and are not
They're
being
not going to be
expanded,
changed.
correct? So no, there would not be a variance required for what's existing.
That's correct.
It would be considered legally nonconforming.
If we have no further questions or comments, I would like to move to deliberations. And move that we move to deliberations.
We would need, a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, motion to close the public hearing and move to deliberations.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. So I guess I'll start because I'll just speak loudly for a moment. I think that the hardship here is the fact that the existing structure is non-conforming. I think that intensification of the non-conformity here is acceptable. And I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that I remember there being case law or when we spoke about something like this very early on, that says that it's acceptable to grant a variance in this situation. They're not adding in any new nonconformities. They're just making the house taller. The addition of the second floor or the expansion of the second floor does not create any additional nonconformity. So I think that the hardship that the existing house is non-conforming, right, is sufficient for us to grant the variance. And I plan to vote in favor of granting the variance.
I would disagree that a variance could be granted just because the house is already non-conforming. But I would say that, given the clarification, you know, it wasn't, I didn't like the statement in the application, but given the clarification that we received that says that the hardship was that the current bedrooms are too small for functional use by current standards. So they need to expand. Or they need to expand that area so that they can get larger bedrooms. And secondly, that the appliances in the basement are subject to flooding and they will be moved by benefit of this change. I think those are two adequate hardships to state as justification for this.
I don't disagree with you. The definition of a legal hardship is not bedroom size. And it's not where the appliances are located or where the service is located. I think that there's a legal precedent that allows us to grant this. I can't quote it because I'm not going to spend hours looking through my notes. But we're on the same page. I agree. If that's what it takes, you know, if the reason for it is what I mean, if that's what we have to go to for a hardship, I mean, I think the fact that the house was located or cited, that the structure was cited prior to zoning, and that, you know, these folks want to add on to their house, that intensification is acceptable. It's fine.
I can't add any more. I agree with what Jason has said. And there is a case law out there. I'm not going to state what it is, but it does allow for intensification. And I believe that case law was decided in the year of 1921. I'm sorry. July of 21. And I agree with Dennis here also on making the structure fully compliant with the issues of the flood zone. So I think the ponderance of what Jason said and what Dennis has just said, I would be in favor.
I have to agree. I found I think what Jason and Dennis said were pretty convincing. You know, like you're adding, you know, second story, you're technically adding more mass, but you're not necessarily really intensifying the setback, right? So I do think that you know, I'm not sure on what the case law was, but I think there is some precedent there that would allow us to grant that, and you know, plus the appliances due to flooding, and also I guess the fact that I'm requiring them to, you know, move their property and destroying a historical building and moving it, you know, towards the a march. There really isn't the thing that, you know, we should be encouraging here, and also, you know, I have to mention the very strong support that all of the neighbors gave. That is very touching. So, for all those reasons, I would be inclined to support this variance.
I agree with what everyone said here. I think what Jason mentioned in regard to the house being built before the zoning regulations went into effect, maintaining the same blueprint of the original house and adding value to the neighborhood, which all individuals here have supported. I would recommend that we approve this.
Would anyone like to speak to the coastal site plan?
Probably ought to do that.
Yeah, we should be discussing it in this closed session because we're going to vote on it when we go back to public.
I did just want to clarify that I think the language of intensification refers to a use and not a structure in case law. And I can provide that language for you for reference. So it's an expansion of a structure and it's an intensification of the use, as I recall the case that you're referring to.
So that would be if you had a restaurant that you were adding seats to make the restaurant busier.
Parking, things of that nature, that's where the intensification comes in. But I think that argument has been made before the board in the past, so there may be confusion. Recalling hearing that before you with respect to a structure, but it does refer to use. In case I'll get that to you from our land use attorney. But regardless, you've had other discussions on the record regarding your hardship.
So I don't think that anything that is currently listed in the coastal site plan, nothing kind of triggers me as I read through it. We don't have an addition to the impervious cover because we're staying in the same plan area. We are far enough from the critical coastal resource. Everything looks like it has been identified correctly in section 3, part 3 of the application. I would have no issues in approving this coastal site plan as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I could agree.
Okay.
So motion to go back to the public hearing or public.
It would just be a motion
You could just make a motion to approve.
to approve or deny.
Okay. So I make a motion to approve the variance requested on the basis that the hardship is that the original structure was sited on the lot prior to zoning regulations being enacted.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Abstentions? Great. Second one. I motion to approve the coastal site plan for 27 Pent Road on the basis that it's consistent with the Coastal Resources Management Act.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that passes unanimously as well.
Okay. Thank you.
very much.
Congratulations. Can I, before we start the next,
Sorry about that. I'm just reaching out there.
before we start the next hearing, can I move for a bio break?
I'm sorry, Jason, you're asking for a
5-minute recess.
5
5-minute
minutes.
recess.
Okay, we'll resume at
9:14,
9:15.
9:15. Thank you.
Sure.
That's the Muggy Town Roadhouse.
Like we're ready to begin again, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you.
And our next application is 23-15, 181 Munger Town Road. And Duo Dickinson is here on behalf of the applicant as well as the applicants.
And the Lidoses are here, the homeowners. And I'm Joe Dickinson, my house is 94 Bradley Road. And we are the architects that are proposing renovation of the existing house. And a totally code compliant in every way, humanly real of the house. But the house was built, and here's the, again, pre-existing, non-conforming, built before zoning. Front of the house sits closer to the street, just as it is now, independent of anything we would ever do. And the house is a classic split ranch kind of house. And because we are bringing back a parent, and we have two children that are both under 3 feet tall, they want to be there for a very long time, so they're remaking the inside to have one continuous public floor, the actual floors. We raise the entry. And in raising the entry, the real practical difficulty is that it's a straight line, horizontal eave, only about a 30-inch overhang the way it is now. And you get snow and ice and you get killed at the front door. So because it's a pre-existing non-conforming condition, we are saying that we would like to use that to essentially, at the worst place, raise the roof at one point by about 1.5 feet over about 5 feet. The total encumbrance is more because the sides of the gable come down lower and it is higher overall. But the truth of the matter is this little rooflet that you see here, it's 1 inch proud of the existing eave here because we need to have trim covering the existing roof eave. So what we're asking for is simply the extension of the height of the existing roof in that one triangular area. No other needs, and it's all basically within the pre-existing non-conforming drip line of the house.
So the triangle diverts.
Diverse the waterway people, and the Linoses have about 10 neighbor statements, several letters, and a petition that says everybody in the neighborhood loves this proposed change.
Thank you. Duo, just on the screen, just sharing for those attending virtually. This is that rooflet that you're referring to.
And if you take this line, here, we are 1.5 feet higher at that peak than that line there. So we are raising 1.5 feet and it goes back. And with this new roof over here, which is really done for aesthetic reasons, is all within the setback and back from the offset.
Okay. It's a hard drawing to.
It's a
So
lot of lines. The model's much better.
I can show you
It's
the
an overhead.
elevation
It's an
drawing.
overhead.
It
So-
is.
So what you're looking at is this.
You got it exactly right.
Okay.
You got it exactly. And that shows the three-dimensional aspects of it. Right, there you go.
If you could hold that
That
to
might be
closer as you can,
Sure. Is that the camera?
somewhere up there.
There we are.
So it's that little triangle there. That
Yeah, I can show it on these plans.
It's a little one, not the big one.
It's this section.
It's that little section in
Yeah,
here.
that one.
That's
okay.
coming out over. This larger
All compliant.
roof here is compliant because the wall of that dormer, would you?
Is within the setback.
Lies with the setback line and there is the allowed 2-foot overhang.
Right.
This section here protrudes further than the 2-foot overhang.
Yeah, it goes 1 inch beyond the 2-foot overhang from here, and this is a shallower overhang. This is deeper to cover up the bay window here. So we're all with basically with that 1 inch of trim, we're exacerbating it a tiny bit this way, but the biggest difference is this 1'6" from this line to that peak. We're going up from what's existing. So it's 1'6". So there is a term of art nobody's used yet today, but it's in zoning used many times it's first of all, there is a true hardship built before zoning. Second, a practical hardship, which is the snow and ice and diversion of the natural elements in a shallow entryway that we're not extending. And then lastly, it has minimum impact. So there's absolute minimum impact to get those practical benefits.
Mr. Dickinson, you're finished with the presentation?
Yes, Chairman.
Are there any questions from the board?
I don't have it. When was the house built? What date?
1950? Whatever, it was before zoning, so that's what we're on, so.
I'm showing 1975.
Oh, it is, well, it's, for whatever reason, it's 2 feet, the overhang itself is actually 2 feet into the setback, which is not good, and then the roof goes beyond that even, so. This will all be in the shy of the setback, whatever I'm gonna have.
Say it's legally non-conforming.
Legally
Not sure that it
pre-existing.
predates Zoning.
I think it might have actually for that level of setback. I mean, because that's a big.
It looks to me that it was just built wrong.
Well, there's that too.
On the setback line.
There's that too. Somebody was having a good time with the surveyor, I
Show
guess.
you the survey.
Okay,
This is the
do we have
survey.
anybody else that's?
Here's the map.
Really big.
Is there any comments from the audience?
No one in attendance, just other applicants and the property owners.
Okay, and I see nobody's on Zoom.
No one has their hand raised on Zoom, no.
If there are no further questions from the board or comments from the public, I move to close the public session and move into deliberations.
Aye.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Does somebody else want to start for this one?
Let's start. This is about as straightforward an application as we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Hopefully positive.
In the positive sense. It's a very simple, unobtrusive change. It does extend a existing non-conformance, but it's minimal and it does divert the snow and ice away from people on the entryway. And I think that's, that plus it's being built prior to zoning that put them in that situation. I think that's a case for approval.
I can't add any more to what Dennis has said, so I would approve it also.
John and Dylan?
I agree with the comments, all the comments, and I would agree.
Yeah, we're really talking about nothing will change here, and plus it's for, safety reasons, right? Right. Functional, so, yeah, I'm happy to support it.
And I have nothing to add to what was already said. I would intend to vote positively in favor of this variance.
Okay. But I move that we approve the
We have
application.
to close the.
We don't need to.
No.
I move that we approve the application, 2315, on the basis of a hardship that there's snow and ice and pre-existing, coming down in a pre-existing compliance and built prior to the zoning. And it's simply a matter of diverting the snow and ice and making the entryway safer.
Dennis, this was not built prior to zoning. It's just legally non-conforming.
Legally non-conforming. I will restate that.
I'll second.
Paul?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
for our Playmobil.
Finally, the last.
Well, you guys are troopers waiting out there.
We are doing-
Do I need to use the microphone?
All right, so 2316.
If you can announce, if you can pick up on this, it'll be fine.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, yes, 48A and 48B Wall Street, number 2316, right, Jason?
That's the next one.
Okay, last but not least, we have a whole team here. Attorney McKeon, would you like to kick it off and introduce your?
Yes, good evening. My name is Chris McKeon. I'm an attorney. My office is in New Haven at 900 Chapel Street. I'm a resident of Madison. As we know from the earlier application, I live at 31 Hotchkiss Lane. And I'm here tonight representing the applicant, Saltwater Property 1 and 2. Our application pertains to 2 lots. They're owned separately by 2 separate LLCs. The principal of that LLC is Mr. Bob Paolucci, sitting to my left here. Mr. Paolucci lives in Madison. He has a daughter in the school system. He also is the operator of Principal Wealth, which currently rents space at 670 Boston Post Road, which is the Aerodome building. He has a very growing business, and it is his desire to construct a new office building on these 2 lots to be the headquarters of his business, Principal Wealth, a business that he anticipates will have in excess of 30 employees. And he wants this site to be the location of that, to keep a business here in town, in our downtown district, which the comprehensive plan, the plan of conservation and development all would suggest that we need bodies downtown to support our local businesses, restaurants. This project obviously will go certainly a long way toward doing that, not just because of his employees, but he has a business with a lot of clients that visit his office. In fact, I was at his office recently, and there are a large number of clients, and I actually even witnessed them supporting some of the surrounding businesses downtown. It's important to note that both of these lots, being on Wall Street and in the downtown district, are also part of the downtown village district, which, for reasons we'll get into shortly, present a whole separate series of challenges when you're trying to develop them, especially on a site like this. In addition to Mr. Paolucci, we have with us tonight, I believe, Mike Ott from Summer Hills Civil Engineers. He's on the Zoom. Obviously, a former town Madison engineer. Mike has extensive experience in projects in Madison and other shoreline towns. We also have our project architects, Greg Nucci and Kelsey Janis from Point One Architects. They have an office at 17 Wall Street here in Madison. Another member of the team is John Cunningham from Tech Landscaping. He is the landscape architect. And last but not least is Paul Cody sitting to my right. He would be the general contractor of the project from Cody Construction. Obviously also extensive construction experience in the town. The reason I take the time to go through that whole team is before we filed an application and came before this board seeking a variance, a lot of work was done, as is typically done, to frankly avoid having to come here. And there are lots and lots of challenges given this site, given its location, given the zoning regulations applicable to the downtown district, and the design criteria for the downtown village district. What this team has done has, in addition to working many, many hours to come up with the proposed project, We met with the town planner, Ms. Mannix, to remove as many of the challenges as possible and to ultimately come up with the proposed plan that we're presenting to you tonight. We additionally reached out to neighbors, other property owners downtown. We realize it's an important part of our town, being Wall Street downtown district. And we also took the extra step of bringing this project to ACCA for their input as to the scope of the building, because the development of buildings on Wall Street and the streetscape of Wall Street are obviously important, but again, present significant challenges when you're trying to construct a building on this particular site. So, as I've mentioned, the particular zoning requirements of the downtown district and the ones that are particularly challenging with respect to building an office building to be functional headquarters for Mr. Paolucci's principal wealth business are the following. Number one, the downtown district requires a maximum of 3,000 square feet of interior space. So what that does is it significantly limits your footprint of your building.
Excuse me, you said it requires a maximum, it requires no more than,
No more
not
than.
allowed to have.
Correct. Right. And it's based on interior area. The regulations are really challenging to go through for this project, so I hope you'll bear with me as I take you through it. Additionally, the downtown district requires a building to have a minimum of 2 stories. Yet, when you look at the regulations applicable to the downtown district otherwise, and the design criteria for the downtown village district, which Greg and Kelsey will get into, making a building with a functional 3rd floor is nearly impossible. At least a building that you would want to look at from the streetscape standpoint of Wall Street. We have some examples in town where buildings took on a particular shape because of the height limitations. There are large slopes on certain buildings. There are buildings that look like they ought to have a standard peak roof, but instead they're flattened on top. These are all because of the height requirement. The height requirement of 30 feet, and when I say height requirement, I mean the average height, which is not the total height, the average height, which has a whole set of ways to determine it, especially when you talk about dormers on a building. The height requirement elsewhere in the downtown district, other than Wall Street, has the ability to go to 45 feet by special exception from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And that was raised from what used to be 40 feet, I believe. I brought that text change to the Planning and Zoning Commission because architects were running into problems designing buildings with 3 or more usable stories and complying with today's requirements of not just ceiling heights, but space between floors for HVAC equipment that's efficient, for other reasons that Greg and Kelsey would get into. Correct, the structure. The Planning and Zoning Commission allowed that special exception height of 45 feet everywhere else but Wall Street. So essentially what we're trying to do is wade our way through the existing set of limitations on what you can build and comply with the design criteria to make a building that fits in with the character and the streetscape of Wall Street. And I'll let Greg and Kelsey get into that a little deeper when they present it. But the specific variance that we're requesting is a variance of section 6.2.3H. And that is the requirement that average building height cannot exceed 30 feet. Based on the design of this building, we need 35 feet. So that's the variance we're seeking. It's important to note that the total building height is not going to change here. The dormers on the building on the third floor, which are required in order to have an elevator building, egress stairs, and actual space that can be used on the third floor, require a dormer here, flat dormer that Greg will explain. That dormer is what is requiring the average height to increase. So the peak of the roof is compliant if it were a straight angled roof down. The dormers are based on our average height regulation, and the way you have to calculate it under our regulations is what is requiring us to be. Building height, total height of it would not require.
I'm sorry, you're saying most of it meets the 30 feet?
Were it not for the dormers on the third floor on the roof, and you'll be able to see it when Greg goes through his design.
So we have 30 feet, 30 feet, 35 feet, 30 feet. 30
No,
feet,
it doesn't,
30
look-
feet.
we have
Whatever,
the
the point-
face, yeah,
You'll show those
The
lines.
point being, just from a conceptual mathematical perspective, that's all it is.
Yeah.
Just a bump up somewhere.
It's not,
there's a gable end that faces the road, right? And on that gable, that's the median height is fine,
I'll let you.
and the ridge is fine.
I'll let you.
yeah, Greg's gonna show you exactly why it's brought about. So how can we justify and provide you, this board, with the basis and the discretion to grant a variance to give us this additional 5 feet in average building height? It's two ways. We've heard a lot tonight. The first being the reduction of nonconformities. What we have currently existing now is a lot that actually fronts on Wall Street. It's a deep, narrow lot that has a single-family home in the very rear of the property. And then behind that lot is another 4,000 plus square foot tiny lot with a structure on it that I think everybody would agree is just not the type of use we want in the downtown district. Not that there's anything wrong with a small house on a little piece of property, but we have such limited areas of town where we can actually have commercial development, the downtown district being one of them. What we'd much rather have, based on our comprehensive plan, not because I'm saying it, but because what our comprehensive plan and our plan of conservation and development say, is we'd like this lot to be conforming, more conforming. It's never going to be conforming in terms of lot width, which is one of the other reasons for the variance, but we're, by merging the two lots, we're making this lot conforming as one lot in terms of minimum lot area. So instead of two non-conforming lots that don't comply with minimum lot area, we end up with one lot that is compliant. So we're eliminating two non-conformities there on two lots. The structure on the rear lot is also non-conforming in terms of the rear setback. So the demolition of both of these structures, the one on the rear lot will also remove non-conformities.
The side to top.
Yeah, the rear lots have, it's difficult to differentiate between side and rear setbacks. That structure is a violation of one of them. It's either a side that is equal, or it's a rear, which is 15 feet. It doesn't really matter for our purposes tonight. It will be demolished, and that yard nonconformity will be removed. So you end up with the purchaser's, the applicant's proposed project here, a conforming lot in terms of lot area, and a use which the comprehensive plan and the plan of conservation and development, namely a business office use, is preferable. Based on those two things, the comprehensive plan and plan of conservation and development. So on top of the elimination of the nonconformities, and these aren't reductions of nonconformities, these are eliminations of nonconformities. In the case law applicable to reducing nonconformities, when they're eliminated, it is more consistent with what zoning is trying to do. We're all trying to make things more compliant zoning wise. So eliminating them is certainly better than reducing. In addition to the elimination of the two nonconformities, we submit to you that the site itself also satisfies the traditional hardship requirement when considered with regulations in the downtown district and the design criteria of the downtown village district. The reason for that is, as I said, it's a 64-foot wide lot. And it obviously will have, when merged, a very long, narrow lot. But in addition to its narrowness, there is, and I don't know if you've been by the site, I went by this morning, it is a fairly precipitous drop in elevation from Wall Street as you enter into the site. Presents extreme challenges with respect to stormwater management. Also coming up with a building height that observes the street front presence of Wall Street and the streetscape of Wall Street, and provides the owner with functional space. So that's why we're here before you seeking what I would consider a modest variance request. And we'll show you the height of this structure in relation to all the surrounding buildings, so you can see and judge for yourself that we think that on either front, the elimination of nonconformities or traditional hardship, you would have the discretion to grant this variance. There is a section of the, and I submitted a letter by email to Aaron late in the day. It might have been after business hours. I can submit a hard copy of it too, just for the record.
Thank you. I just wrote that I had to print it.
It essentially lays out these points that I'm making to you right now in terms of the reduction of nonconformities and the traditional hardship argument. But there's a section of the plan and conservation and development that I found particularly interesting in this scenario. It actually is on page 39 of the POCD, saying that Madison Center is an economic development opportunity area within Madison. As discussed in this plan, Madison residents want uses to provide tax revenue to support local services. Madison Center is a logical area for such development, provided development can be done in a way that preserves and enhances the character of the area. Development in and near Madison Center with access to a rail station and bus service provides a significant opportunity that many other communities simply do not have. Such development can occur through careful redevelopment of parcels and, I'm highlighting this part, reducing or eliminating some impediments to expansion. Our system of downtown district regulations, which are very particular, coupled with the downtown village district design criteria, is a tangled web. It just is. And Greg will explain this more. So the upshot of all this is the project that we're proposing is the least possible variance we can ask of this board to accommodate Mr. Paolucci to build a building which complies with all of these things. It's otherwise completely compliant with the regulations of the downtown district and the design criteria. It's this one variance that we're here for. So oh yeah, I think I told you we did go to ACA, but we went to them on an informal basis because of this complicated series of regulations we're trying to comply with. And although it was preliminary feedback, and we'll have to go back to them when we go for site plan approval and major renovation in the downtown village district, which requires a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission. But ACA did give feedback that the scope and scale of this building is consistent with the Wall Street streetscape. So with that, I want to turn it over to Greg and Kelsey to go through the architectural, so you can see what we're doing here.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Greg Nucci with Point One Architects.
I'm Kelsey Janis, Department Architects.
Can I bother you to put that one on?
Start from the beginning.
Yeah, just,
Thank you.
thank you.
Together.
I know it's late. Just to kind of start here, I'll just orient everybody where the project is being proposed. This is Wall Street. This is our proposed project in 3D. And then these are all the other buildings along Wall Street that we actually had a surveyor go out and get the building height. So we wanted to know where our building stood in relation to all the other buildings along Wall Street. So we've done that, and I'll get back to that because that's kind of where I want to end up at the end of my presentation. So let me start with the second page, Aaron, if you don't mind. So as Chris had mentioned, that we end up with a very long, narrow site for our building. And thus, in order to get a driveway access and access to the parking, our building footprint becomes pretty long and narrow as well. So that presents some problems with ADA access, elevators and stairways, especially coming up through dormers on the third floor, which is kind of one of the hardships that we'll explain. So again, the site slopes from, like, if this was 0, it slopes down to about 5 feet in the back, 6 feet in the back. So we're also dealing with required parking spaces, which we have ample, where we're dealing with 2 entrances, one from Wall Street, which is part of the ACA requirement. They want a walkable, visible entrance from Wall Street. So that's one entrance here. And we also are required to have an accessible route into your building from a handicapped accessibility point of view. So from this parking area, we need a ramp to get you up to an entrance into the main level here as well.
Okay.
We're doing our best for landscaping. We've got an outdoor patio space for the employees, as well as some new plantings and large trees. One of the big components that we're trying to maintain here is there's a street tree that's very large right along Wall Street. So we are proposing to keep that. It was important as to where the building and the entrance was located in order to maintain that tree. So it was something that we did purposefully to try to maintain that, because we know it's a big, important tree in town. I think you can go to the next slide.
You're not excavating that so that it's all level.
Yeah, no.
It's still going to
It
be
slopes back, and I'll show you that
Right.
as well. So this is a 3D version of kind of a Google Street Map view, right? And we superimposed our proposed building here. And then this is the neighbor's building. And then the building just beyond ours, and that's our big tree, is where Moxie is. So that just orients you where this view is taken from. And I want to talk a little bit about the ACA requirements, because there's certain things that they require that we've complied with, which is just about everything. They require a front porch facing Wall Street. They require the building be located no more than 20 feet back from the property line on Wall Street. So they want that front facing building right up against the Wall Street for walkability. They actually like some kind of a storefront facade. They list that in their in their regulations. Again, they like traditional building materials, residential scaled windows, things of that nature, which we're providing. And you can see here where the grade kind of slopes back here. We've got a little sign proposed here, but we'll go through the signage regulations at a later date. So we've got one floor, we've got two floors, and then we have these dormers on the third floor, which, according to ACA, they needed to be set 3 feet back from this facade, which we comply with, and they also need to be set only 1 foot back from the building facade, but we're like 9 or 10 feet back. So we've tried our best to keep the dormers kind of up on the roof and not being part of the kind of the imposing elevation here. So Aaron, if you don't mind going to the next page for me. So maybe you can just pan up a little bit. These are the floor plans, the proposed floor plans. So again, we've got an entrance from Wall Street here, and then we've got our handicapped entrance from the back parking area back here. So because of the narrow lot, our building is only 34 feet wide. We had to figure out a way to get egress stairs up to the 3rd level. We have an elevator for ADA accessibility that goes all the way up to the 3rd level. And elevators don't like to bend, so they like to go straight up. And stairs as well, they don't like to bend because they have to maintain a fire rating for the building code. It goes straight up. So we located those on the north side because all the light from east, south, and west, we wanted to bring into the building. So we call that the core of the building, where we've got stairs and bathrooms and things of that nature. Aaron, can you go to the next slide? Because I'll get kind of right to the crux of the variance that we're adding. So as it stands now, the gable end of our front facade here, that meets the intent of the 30-foot zoning regulations. The dormer, you can see on both the long facades, this facade and that facade, that's where we're asking for some relief for the 5-foot variance. In order to get on this side, I've got an elevator tower, that's a chimney, that's just in stone. And I've got stair towers here that are required for headroom to get down to the lower level. And as you can see, we've held the dormers back the best we could. And that shaded, that really it's the highlighted area is the area that we're requesting the variance for. It's that 5-foot relief just on the dormers, not on the main building, because the main building facade that faces Wall Street complies with the zoning.
Okay, let me ask you, because I'm looking.
Yeah.
The elevation down on the bottom right. Okay. I think I'm seeing that right there, yes, back, right there, okay, so that's the gable end.
Correct. Yes.
Where on that drawing is anything higher than that?
Beyond it and behind there. Can you go to the next slide? Because I think it's the 3D version of this. Yes, maybe this will help.
Okay.
So this is basically the view you just saw. That's the gable end that complies with the building height requirement. They measure the building height to the midpoint of the gable. So if you had a gable like this, the building height's measured to the midpoint. And so the interesting thing about it is because of our site, our other kind of constraint, and Chris can talk more about the hardship, is that's taken from the average finished grade of the project. And because our site is sloping down, our average finished grade line is down low. So we have to take that measurement from that line up to here, and that's what's also constraining us with that regulation. So, and
Right.
because our building has to be on Wall Street, 20 feet back from that property line, according to the design guidelines, and we agree it should be there, right? But it's the sloping site as well that's given us kind of fits with
And
that, with that
I
height.
think because of the size of the dormer, that's why the height is taken from the midpoint of the dormer, because it's considered a major dormer in our definitions
Yeah.
versus a minor dormer.
Correct.
Show them the
And so
point on the
that-
dormer that it's
This dormer here, because of the size of the dormers on this roof line,
Right.
you no longer can take your midpoint from here, you have to take it from the midpoint of the dormer, and that's where the 5 feet comes.
It's midpoint of the dormer roof, I think, actually.
Hey, Aaron,
Yes,
so there's no maximum building height in the downtown district? It's just the average height?
It's a little wonky because they talk about maximum building height, but then they measure to the
I have
middle.
to stop sharing to pull up my regs on the
Yeah.
computer, so I can look that up for you if you wanna. We can
I
finish.
mean, I have it,
the-
so this is what, this is 6.2.3, right?
Residential.
It might just be the average instead of, you're talking about a maximum to a total.
Yeah, maximum any
Take a
one.
look at the table in the section 6 to tell you.
That's building height.
It may not be, I just don't, I could pull them up on the computer, but I don't want to stop screen sharing yet.
No, it says,
So I will look it up as soon as,
yeah, if you could bring up that table and explain it when we're done sharing, that would be awesome.
sure.
So again, it's really just the dormers that we're asking for the variance for. Everything else on the project complies with the downtown village district regulations as far as the aesthetics, the parking requirements, the setback requirements, the lot coverage, we're way under on lot coverage. And Mike Gott's on here, he can speak to that because I think he has that data. I guess, what other
Did
sheets?
you want, I was gonna say your street view was the only one you said you were coming back to.
Yeah, so
right?
that would be very helpful to go back to the first page.
Showing the rhythm. Not very good without.
That's okay. It's this, so just leave it just like that. It's perfect. So again, we went out and actually measured the peaks and the eaves of all the buildings along Wall Street just to see the size and scale of our project and whether it fit within the context of the village district. We believe it does. We've got some buildings that are taller than our building. We've got some buildings that are shorter than our building. And if you notice, there was a big void here before we proposed this building. It's a big gap in the streetscape. And so architecturally, there's this rhythm of buildings that kind of march all the way along Wall Street. And ours kind of fits into where there wasn't one, which adds to the rhythm of the street and the facade along Wall Street. So, there are some buildings that are, at least in the back, that are 8 to 10 feet taller than what we're proposing here.
That was 47 feet.
Yeah. That are connected. And you can see, as far as the scale and the length of our project compared to some of the other buildings along Wall Street, it's in keeping with the size and scale. And I think that's why ACA, they kind of felt that, the size and scale of the project is appropriate. And again, it's just the roof dormers the roof dormers are why we're here, to try to get some relief. Like Chris said, we're eliminating a whole bunch of nonconformities. We've got some sloping site that is adding to our hardship as how we calculate the building height and where that line is actually has to be drawn. So I guess I'd be open to questions, or if you want to go back and look at any of the other drawings that.
I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned the fact, and the lot is sloped. mentioned the fact that the lot is sloped and where you have to measure from to
Yes.
calculate your average building height. If the lot was on grade with the street, would we still be here?
You might be here for a little of it.
6 inches.
Yeah.
Like maybe six, I don't know, Mike,
Our-
I'll maybe talk more to.
Our average grade is at 98.4. And we're at,
The street is
yeah, the
almost at
street,
100.
yeah, street's at 100. So,
Average 100, 101.
So 2.5 feet?
yeah.
We closest, okay.
And actually and we're asking for 5 feet because, you know, in full disclosure, we're at like 4 feet, 3 inches, but we want to keep some room for constructability so that when we do this, we don't get in trouble with like a roof shingle that's a little higher than the application. So that's where we're at. But 5 feet kind of gets us there. The other hardship, like Chris said, is we have, you know, that regulation's kind of really set up for residential projects, and we've got a commercial building that has ductwork and structure and plumbing and everything required of a commercial building. And when you add those layers in, our floor to floors are at the minimum where we can accomplish creating that ductwork and drop ceilings and light fixtures. So, I don't know, Chris or anyone has anything to add to our presentation if you want.
No, I would simply say that we have all of the different design professionals here, and to the extent you have questions or concerns that would come up during deliberation, I request that they come up now, so we have the ability to respond to them or provide you with more information if that's what you need, or explanations or anything else. I don't know whether there's people from the public here. I know we have a letter of support from Bill Plunkett next door at Moxie. I know we also met with the neighbors on the other side and continue to work with them, and they're obviously not opposing our request here. We continue to work with all of the neighbors because assuming we were able to get this variance, which we think you have the discretion to grant us, we have more hoops to go through in terms of site plan, in terms of ACA, in terms of downtown village district public hearing. So we have all of those lines of communication open. I would make one final note, and rather, as you know, we're required to notify everybody within 150 feet of the site. Many people do that simply by sending the public notice that's in the paper to neighbors. Mike Ott prepared a letter detailing our project, inviting people to contact us so that we could react ahead of time to any potential concerns. I don't think any of us have been contacted, and I don't know whether anybody's here who wants to speak, but we welcomed the input and in fact reached out for it. So.
I did look at the regulation. It's, it says maximum height, and maximum height is an average height, and that was clarified by the Planning and Zoning Commission in 2018. And I have the minutes, actually the paper minutes in my zoning regulations, because this has come up before. Because it doesn't, it says in the table, it says height max. And this question was raised and went back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they did clarify that this particular section H where is average building height. And again, this is where Chris spoke to the total of 45 feet, excluding properties on Wall Street. So there is not a total height, it's only an average.
That's how.
Thank you, Aaron.
Sure.
Are there questions from the board?
I think I understand it.
Yeah. Yes, I think I do too.
Is there,
Got it.
is
Got
there,
it.
is there a basement involved at all?
There is a basement.
There's a cellar.
That was another challenge, I guess, in the design was to understand that there's a definition of the cellar and there's a definition of the basement. And in this particular situation, it is defined as a cellar, not a basement.
And it's not the whole building, right? It's only a portion of the building that is.
It's mechanical, it's a lot of mechanical
Right.
storage space. And again, the cellar doesn't
Count towards floor
count
area.
towards floor area. But again, like Chris said, we meet all the other zoning regulations. We're not here for setback requirements, coverage requirements. We've done a lot of work to try to get here.
I guess
Yeah.
it didn't make any sense to, if you wanted to raise that, where you had that slope, I mean, to fill it in.
We can't because there's a problem with the neighbors. We have to pick
Oh,
up
I
the
see.
neighbors' drainage. We're
Oh, okay.
responsible for, we've been talking to the Karrases next door about how we're gonna deal with the
Yeah.
drainage and.
No, I could see that now,
Yeah.
yeah.
And all three properties kind of train right in the same
Yeah,
spot.
we're, you can talk to.
But Mike has already actually got the whole
Okay.
stormwater management under control.
Yeah. I have no further questions.
Do you want to address that stormwater management? I mean, we're in and out.
If you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really in the purview of the variance request, but as far as the site development,
We are
We're
taking
here.
care of our site water as well as the neighbor's site water that's coming down. We've offered to take care of that as well. Because it does pond there, it has ponded, so we're planning to fix all that.
Okay.
It's all subsurface.
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be
So
infiltrated.
it's- Okay. Okay. Do you have other presentations?
We are not in a coastal zone.
Yeah.
Of this application. Interesting enough, the entire downtown is excluded from the coastal zone.
So, I don't have any more questions for the presentation. Do you have any, from the public? Got a summary.
I think the only people in the public.
He's their civil
These are
engineer
some.
and surveyor. Our only attendee is Alex Province. So Alex, if you have anything to say on this, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll likely move on. No.
So nothing from Alex, nothing more from the board. I would like to move that we proceed into deliberations.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This is tough because, we have a brand new structure being built. And that brand new structure is before us because the average height is too much. And the hardship is what? I've read through attachment A. The hardship is brought upon by a desire for a third floor. If that's what I'm reading correctly.
Jason, I can share that document if that's helpful, the letter, the legal argument from Attorney McKeon that he submitted on the record this evening. I do have a digital copy, if that's helpful.
Yeah, if you could show that to us.
Yeah, so all I have is attachment A.
Yep, so this just came in this evening, so I think it
Okay.
is beneficial to screen
that up to
share
read?
that for you, so you can read through that. Tell me when you're ready. Advance the screen.
I'm good.
See point two one more time.
So back up to.
Oh, number 2, sure.
Number 2 shows a little hardship. Oh,
Right, but if yeah, I'll wait till people are done reading.
next page. See this stuff? You can see it.
That's it.
You good, Jason?
Yeah, I'm good.
So if you want to, you had some skepticism about the,
If we weren't on Wall Street, we wouldn't be here. It would be a special exception permit. The fact that, so we're on Wall Street, we have an average height of 35 feet when we're allowed to have 30. We have a brand new construction. That's the facts, right?
in a ruling that specifically says Wall Street can't do that.
Right, right. We have a weird lot, we have a weirdly shaped lot, right? And that weirdly shaped lot can't be filled in to bring it up to the street grade because of drainage. Got it. Even if it was, and we were, and there was no cellar or we didn't have windows in the cellar, we'd still be over 35 feet. looking at the buildings that are, looking at the presentation or the materials presented that showed the relative height of the proposed structure compared to the other structures that are on Wall Street, at least on that side of the street, it's not the tallest building, but it's not the smallest either. You know, it is in accordance with the plan of conservation and development. It is in accordance with, you know, what ACA wants in a design building. It does fill in an empty spot on the street. You know, we have all of that. You know, we have the argument that, you know, the argument that it reduces nonconformances because it combines two lots, right? That's an argument as well. You know, we have a non-legal argument. We have a local guy that wants to, you know, build a structure in downtown Madison to move his building or to move his business, to keep his business in Madison. You know, that's not legal, but it's, you know, not completely exempt from the decision-making process. You know, I think one of the things that we need to look at is how will literal enforcement of this zoning, you know, affect the property. I don't think literal enforcement is going to adversely affect the property. I think somebody's going to be able to build a structure, whether it be commercial or residential, on that lot that meets zoning. Right? Somebody will be able to, and maybe somebody will, but we have somebody who wants to right now. You know, I'm kind of torn, but I'm leaning toward approving it. I think it's consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. You know, and like I said, if it was on Boston Post Road, we wouldn't be here. They'd just be applying for a special exception permit to go higher. So we have that to weigh too. There's a reason that you know, Wall Street is zoned at 30 feet. That reason is opaque to me. But that's, you know, when they wrote the zoning regs, that's what got written in there. Anybody else? Dennis? Bill?
Yeah, I think I'm leaning in favor of approving it. As you stated, Jason, they eliminated, you know, the non-conformities of the present two lots, and the new building lot is now in conformity. And I think another factor is when you build on Wall Street, it sounded to me as though there was a very complicated series of regulations to try to build something that would fit into that lot. In other words, it wasn't clear. It wasn't clear cut. And I kind of got the impression that you guys really spent a lot of time and effort in trying to be as compliant as you possibly could. And the fact that you got the approval from, what's the group, the ACA? Yeah, I think that weighs into this decision also, because they have more experience than I would of what's appropriate downtown there.
But
So
they're not a legal.
I know it's not legal, yeah,
function of government. We
yeah.
are.
So, yeah, I would lean that way.
I'm like you, Jason, I'm troubled by the idea that somebody for some reason came up with zoning that specifically exempted Wall Street from the allowance to go to 45 feet, whatever it is, and said, well, there's 30. On the other hand, I see that it's not, even at that point, it won't be the tallest building there.
Yeah.
But you're measuring height there, and height is not, you know, the rule is average height, but presumably that's the Clarity software building, but doesn't matter. It's just it's a presumption, but the point is, it's been done before, right?
Yeah.
At least as a measured height. And, you know, if it's been done before, then there's a precedent.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, they could hit 30 and they could make it just square edges, right? They could go 30 feet and call that the average, but because we have an angled roof, right, we have to measure the average height instead of the total height. I get it. We have the dormers, which make the space usable, right? By giving us flat walls as we go back. Yeah, I lean toward approving. I still lean toward approving. So.
You know.
On.
Well, I echo what's been said here, that the building, end of the street there is already higher than this particular building, so. You know, issuing a variance, it does not have a significantly detrimental effect on overall zoning plan of the neighborhood. There would be no reason to issue a variance, and I think this building would fit into that category.
Bill?
So, I guess to summarize, there isn't necessarily like one smoking gun as to why we should necessarily support this variance, but I think it's fair to say it's a combination of things. I mean, the incline, you know, and the way it's measured is one, but that's like one, maybe like halfway. And you take, perhaps the other half is the introduction in non-conformity by commodity a lot. And so that might be the other half. And, you know, it's not going to look out of place. I think it fits the character of Wall Street. Now, you probably could theoretically construct, you know, a building in conformance, but, you know, as the applicant said, like, many buildings have like their roofs cut off to conform, you know, the federal requirements, so it's going to impact the aesthetics of the, you know, character of, you know, a neighborhood, right? So that's going to be, you know, at least somewhat detrimental, right? So I think in general, the building does, you know, fit into the general purpose of the zoning requirements, and you know, I mean, especially since like commercial space, you know, so limited.
I think one of the things that we're buoyed by here, or that one of the, and I think Dylan, you saying that it's a commercial space kind of opened my mind back up to something that I took a note on here earlier, and that the commercial buildings are by code. I think that they said that the presenter said that by code the floors have to be 10 feet tall, right? So in order to build a 2+ story structure on Wall Street that meets commercial requirements, yada yada yada, you know, that I mean, that's a hardship too. It's a commercial building, it's not a residential building, right? You could build a residential 3-floor building and call it a good day. I think the fact that it's a commercial building, the lot is sloped. I mean, I'm grasping. I mean, Attorney McKeon's letter definitely highlighted all of these, you know, ways that we can go. I do think that we have standing to make this decision. I agree there. Right. If it was on Boston Post Road, I don't think we would have standing, because there's another process that we can go, that the applicant would go toward for a special exception permit. For a special exception permit. You know, I would. What is, you know, the initial question is, what is the hardship? Right. And I think that, unlike like Dylan said, I don't think there's a smoking gun. I think it's an accumulation of a number of characteristics of the lot, what's required for building, you know, and all that happy stuff. All of those things come in to make one hardship, right? I think the only thing that is preventing me from going gung ho, yes, let's approve this, is the fact that it's a brand new building, right? And you know, the building could have gone back farther to meet the square footage requirements of the business. You know, and it would have met all of the zoning regs, and we wouldn't be sitting here. You know, that's the only thing that I'm not, that's the only thing that's not pushing me over the edge. Into gung ho me fighting for this variance. That's it. So I think we need to figure out or determine what the hardship is, and then if we agree on a hardship, then we vote to approve the variance.
I think you know, it's a combination of the hardship of the size of the lot. You know, if you extend the building farther back, you lose parking. You know, they said they have an active client base as well as their employees.
Mhm.
So the hardship would be as stated there, that the size of the lot is very restricting.
What is the lot? I mean, the minimum lot width, I think, is 100 feet,
Correct.
6.2.3A, and the current lot width is 64 feet. So it's a non-conforming lot regardless. Yeah, I mean, Dennis, you and I usually craft the motions here. Would we motion that the hardship is that it's a non-conforming lot?
Yeah, the size, the small size of it as a non-conforming lot restricts the options available to them for expanding horizontally. So they have to go vertical.
About the slope.
The slope of the land also
Yeah.
is constraining, but it's not, you know, it's an additional factor, but wouldn't do it in and of itself. So, yeah.
Okay, do you have an idea for a motion?
Okay. I move that we approve application 2316 for 48A and 48B Wall Street. As presented, based on the fact that there are some reduction of non-conformances, plus also a hardship as stated in the size of the lot is very constraining. Width being only 64 feet instead of 100. And the slope of the lot adding to the construction challenges.
I'm okay with that.
And second it.
Oh, sorry, I second it.
Get a little punchy.
It's 10:30, man.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments or discussion on?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations.
Okay, I think we can.
Next, moving on, next agenda item is approval of minutes from last week.
I read the minutes. I checked them.
Thank you so much.
And I move, we approve the minutes as.
I'll second that. All in favor? Opposed? 5-0, unanimous. Meeting is adjourned.
All right.